then proceed with item 26 and 27, and then move back to item 3, the consent agenda, and move through in the regular order there, with time for additional public comment at the end of the meeting. Is that acceptable to the commissioners?
I can make a quick comment. I think for this meeting, given the way we've advertised, it's the right thing to do. In the future, I hope we could make it clear that there's at least generally oral communication at the beginning. At the beginning of the meeting, I'd be fine with it anywhere as long as it's time certain, but at the beginning is the easiest way to do that. But I'm fine with it for this meeting. Thanks for that suggestion, Marvin.
Great. Then we will proceed with public comment until 9:30. If you have a comment you'd like to make, please use the raise hand feature, and I'll call on you in the order that hands are raised. Our first public speaker will be Mark Miller. And clerk, do we have the timer for, we'll provide 2 minutes for each speaker.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, my name is, greetings, Chair Koenig, Commissioners and Commissioner Alternates. My name is Mark Miller, co-chair of the No Way Greenway campaign. I am here today because the people have spoken. Measure D was about 3 things: replacing the rail and trail plan with a trail-only plan, removing the existing railroad tracks using rail banking, and permanently ending all planning for future rail transit. In what can only be described as a landslide defeat, over 70% of Santa Cruz County voters forcefully rejected all of these ideas. Measure D's defeat is a political mandate from our community to reject rail banking and use the rail corridor to provide a truly equitable, reliable, and environmentally sustainable rail and trail facility to connect our communities together, our county to adjacent counties, and to all of California. Measure D revealed a deep passion in our community for a future that includes both rail and trail. The people want a transportation system that is greener, more equitable, and more efficient than what we have now. Voters recognize that rail and trail is the best way to deliver on that future. Accordingly, today, we, the people, call on the entire Regional Transportation Commission and staff to pursue rail and trail together, immediately end all efforts to rail bank the rail corridor, search for state and federal funding opportunities to fund both passenger rail and trail, prioritize the most equitable, sustainable policy and funding strategies, permanently end efforts to isolate South County from North County. At the end of the day, the people want a more equitable and more sustainable transportation system that leaves no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next up, Mr. Ryan Sarnataro.
Okay. So what did the voters say in voting down Measure D? No to traffic on Highway 1. You know from your studies the impact of the train on Highway 1 traffic will be minimal. No to rail banking. You know rail banking is required to protect the county from huge fiscal liability. No to inequality. You know the sales tax required for a train will hurt low-income residents, and a train ride will cost so much more than the bus that ridership will skew to higher-income people. Yes to a trail next to rails. You know this option is too expensive to be completed with Measure D funds, and the result will be a broken trail forcing users onto streets. Yes to a lower carbon footprint. You know the excavation, vegetation removal, and retaining walls required for a trail next to rail has the largest current GHG footprint. Yes to a carbon-free, fast, inexpensive train that solves our transit problems now. You know that's an impossible dream. A train is decades away at a cost beyond what society is likely willing to pay. You know how small the impact on traffic. You have 2 choices: an interim trail that leaves open the possibility of the train dream, or a less useful, more expensive, environmentally destructive trail next to unused rails. I understand politically some of you are trapped in between the unrealistic expectations of voters fed years of disinformation and physical and fiscal reality. Sometimes responsibility requires courage, and if our better angels can ascend, leadership will be rewarded. Do the right thing. Build the best trail as soon as possible in the least expensive and most environmentally friendly manner. You are not precluding a train. You're simply putting it into its proper context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarnataro. Next up, Saladin Sale.
Good morning, commissioners and alternates. Saladin Sale, living in the Santa Cruz part of our county. We look out today on a different world than we saw at the time of the last RTC meeting. On May 5, no one knew what the voters wanted with regard to the development of the rail corridor. Did they want to change course, remove and rail bank the tracks to build a different kind of trail? Or did they want to preserve the tracks for future use and complete the trail already underway? Today, while results are not final, we have a clear answer from the voters. A thundering endorsement of trail and rail by a whopping 73 to 27% margin as of last night. Today, I asked those commissioners who said they wanted to wait and see the results of the election to unequivocally state their readiness to proceed with the will of the people. Working together, the RTC can make significant progress in the coming months, now that the competing vision has been so roundly rejected. Approve the business plan, expedite completion of the rail trail from Davenport to Watsonville, stop threatening and start working cooperatively with Roaring Camp to develop realistic cost estimates for necessary repairs that are not Cadillac-level excesses, and look seriously at their conceptual proposal for expanded rail service. Vigorously apply for all potential grant funding, and above all, really move forward. The level of public awareness of the potential for our rail corridor has taken a quantum leap, as has the desire for results, not further delay. Come, commissioners, alternates, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sale. Next up, Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian from Trail Now. You all should have received a letter from me with concerning Mr. Hurst's comments to Bloomberg. His comments were incorrect in the way of rail banking, and it shows the misinformation being provided to the public about rail banking. And I'm shocked that a commissioner would go and publicly make false statements. And the staff works hard to show the evidence. Now, concerning Measure D, we feel is the message from the voters, it's not trail only. It's transit and trail. That's the message. It's not rail. Rail will never happen on that coastal corridor. The sea level rising requirements alone will prevent it. The Coastal Commission will never, state of California will never allow for fixed rail system investment that's feet from the ocean, from the Pacific Ocean. We want to advocate that we want transit and trail. That's really the message from the community. Trail Now has always been a supporter of transit and trail. We have never been trail. So we want you to step back. First of all, ask Mr. Hurst to apologize for providing misinformation. A commissioner should not be doing that. The staff works very hard to provide the public with detailed facts, and he personally communicated misinformation to the public. And secondly, rail bank as soon as possible. The corridor has been closed for a decade now. Please open it. We need that corridor open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Next up is Mr. Jack Nelson.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. I'm Jack Nelson. I'm a retired land use planner and environmental planner. I've served as chair of the local Sierra Club Transportation Committee. I've served as co-chair of the campaign for sustainable transportation, but I'm speaking for myself this morning. I'd like to first endorse the remarks made by Mark Miller and Saladin Sale about Measure D. Commissioners, what I see here is we have the prospect of 2 north-south main transportation corridors in the county. One is the greenhouse gas highway, and the other offers potentially the lowest per passenger mile or travel mile greenhouse gas emissions in terms of electric rail, bicycling, and walking. Those are all low energy demand, potentially travel modes, whereas the automobile, whether electric or internal combustion, is the highest energy demand system of transportation. So with Measure D's results, I would suggest you just might have a request from the voters to save our butts on climate and move ahead with the rail corridor business plan and get going. Stop delaying. Please serve the future on climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Next up, Matt Farrell.
Good morning, Chair Koenig, commissioners and alternates. Matt Farrell, also co-chair of the No Way Greenway Committee. First of all, I would like to thank all the election workers and volunteers who helped make this election possible and all the work they continue to do in counting ballots. It's an important task for democracy, and there were a lot of people who voted late in the election, so they've been working really hard. Secondly, I'd like to thank the vast number of community organizations who supported No on D. This reflected the broader community support that was shown at the polls. And it was really important, I think, in making it clear that this isn't just a limited priority for people. When Fort met with commissioners last year, they presented a poll that showed that 74% of voters supported rail and trail. The results today from the election are, 72%. So that poll seems very prescient in terms of saying what people in this county want. So please move forward with rail and trail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Next up, Barry Scott.
Unmute. Thank you, commissioners and Chair Koenig. This vote is really amazing. I think it needs to be taken as an outright rejection of Greenway. Period. An outright rejection of trail only. Period. And it's consistent not just with Fort's well-conducted survey that showed support for rail transit in the 70s. That's consistent also with RTC surveys done in 2014 and 2015, and surveys done by the Transportation Agency of Monterey County a year ago, I think, all of which showed 70%, in the neighborhood of 70% support for rail transit. I want to point out something that is often forgotten about the TCAA, the Transit Corridor Alternatives Analysis in the business plan. That was the first chance to look at something lighter and more affordable. And when you proceed with looking into lighter, more modern, affordable systems, we're going to find that rail transit is more feasible than we ever thought. So I'm asking the commissioners to pursue funding for rail repairs, pursue funding for rail transit planning, and reject rail banking, which is just a distraction. I'll remind the commissioners of Director Preston's letter to the CTAC of March 8th, 2019. The RTC board unanimously affirmed its commitment to leave the railroad infrastructure in place, maintain freight rail service, and institute high-capacity public transit service. I'm asking the commissioners to support that, and you have the public support in sticking to that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next up is Milani Clark.
Good morning, commissioners and staff. I just have a brief comment this morning. On behalf of Roaring Camp Railroads, we'd like to thank the voters of Santa Cruz County for overwhelmingly making the correct choice on Measure D. It's a particular importance to me because this is my family business that I've been engaged in my whole life, and Measure D threatened its future. I sincerely hope that the commission and staff take the outcome to heart and make decisions consistent with what the voters want. Roaring Camp has always extended its help to the RTC since its purchase of the corridor, and we look forward to continue to do so as we move forward with Rail and Trail. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Next up, Michael Saint.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. Good morning, commissioners. Michael Saint with Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. I'd like to share with you an article from Street Blogs LA and change the subject a little bit. The title of this article is Metro Committee Expected to Vote to Not Build Lower 710 Freeway Widening Project. I think that's really exciting news. Basically, Metro and Caltrans are now, instead of touting the pursuit of an equity and environmentally focused multimodal investment strategy, and that's the reason for canceling this widening project. A few of their comments are interesting. They kind of go along with a lot of the things that we're doing presently. Metro and Caltrans are not doing this out of the kindness of its heart. The community caught them trying to get around environmental laws, and then when federal and state agencies essentially declared the project illegal and harmful, local freeway builders reluctantly acknowledged the necessity of restarting their planning progress. Caltrans wishes to move forward with selecting the no-build alternative as the locally preferred alternative. We believe this determination is responsive to current concerns related to property, equity, environmental air quality impacts. I think we are going through the same process with our widening of our highway at this time. The RTC does have the option at a 75% vote to adjust funding. I think that funding should move away from the highway, become more mass transit oriented, specifically the rail and trail, as well as slight widening of the highway for a dedicated bus on shoulder project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Saint. Next up, Jacob Wysocki.
Hi, am I coming through?
Yep.
Okay. So as we move past Measure D, one thing I'd like to bring up is a reminder of why the Surface Transportation Board allowed the RTC to purchase the line in 2012. The terms under which the line was purchased is called the State of Maine precedent, and this allows the separation of the physical assets and the right-of-way. The purpose of the State of Maine precedent has basically twofold. One is that it helps state and local communities preserve freight rail service on lines where profitability is marginal. The second is that it promotes the efficient use of existing freight rail corridors for rail mass transit without harming common carrier freight rail operations. During the purchase process, the RTC told the Surface Transportation Board that we were purchasing the line with the intention of preserving freight. Now, obviously, freight is not going to generate a lot of money locally, If there were a lot of money being generated by freight, we never would have been able to purchase the line in the first place. Also, I understand the repairs to the line are expensive. However, this is the responsibility we have assumed in exchange for the right to own this corridor and build a trail. With the defeat of Measure D, the county general plan contains the objective still, 3.7, preserving the corridor for availability to carry freight. So while I understand that many commissioners see maintaining this line for freight as a burden, I'd like to encourage us to come through on our responsibility and do what we told the Surface Transportation Board we were going to do, which is maintain this for freight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wasaki. Next up, Ms. Sally Arnold.
Thank you. Measure D was about 4 things. Do you want to eliminate passenger rail from the general plan? Do you want to rail bank? Do you want to tear up the tracks? Do you want a trail only? The answer to all 4 of these questions was a resounding no. The Greenway folks can complain about the results, but the fact is they set the terms of this election. They wrote the initiative just the way they wanted. They chose whether to do this in a primary or a general election. They decided on their messaging to the voters. This entire election was on their terms, and they kept telling you, let the voters decide. Well, the voters have decided. The voters of Santa Cruz County do not want to eliminate planning for passenger rail from our general plan. We do not want to rail bank. We do not want to tear up the tracks, and we do not want Greenway's trail only. The election results, about 72, almost 73% so far, are consistent with the polling that was done about 18 months ago. It's consistent with the ratio of communication that you receive every month on this issue. Now we have an expensive election that just confirmed what all the evidence was already pointing to. The vast majority of this community likes the original plan for the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail and future Clean Light Rail. Despite their years of work trying to delay this project by demanding multiple studies and sowing confusion and discontent about the plan, Greenway has not been able to convince the community that we don't want what we want, which is a rail and trail. Now is the time for the commission to listen to the vast majority of your constituents and act on the will of the people. Stop trying to rail bank, build the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail as planned, prepare for future passenger rail service. You have the chance to lead a really popular project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. Next up, Lonnie Faulkner. Ms. Faulkner?
Hi, thanks. I was just given the opportunity to unmute. Thank you, dear commissioners. Equity Transit joins the community in recognizing a clear voting majority opposed to Measure D and the tenets of Measure D, which include rail banking and ripping out the tracks. And the community obviously opposes changing the general plan and settling for trail only. The percentage of voters who in midterm elections the percentage of voters who vote in midterm elections is comparatively small, a strategy Greenway assumed would be in their favor. We know the people who took time to vote are those people who are highly committed to understanding what they are voting on and why. While canvassing in the community, I was very impressed with the hundreds of community members I spoke to, the kinds of questions they asked, and their determination to really understand what Measure D meant for our community. I've heard a few proponents of Measure D state that voters simply voted no due to their confusion and lack of information, but this underestimates the intellect, wisdom, and commitment our voting members of the community have for their democratic process. The community was initially confused by Measure D. Many people kept asking, didn't we already vote to support rail in our community years ago? Let's get it done already. Why are we voting on this again? But in the final weeks before the election, it was clear that people were reading up and studying the issues. They mentioned various articles in local papers were confusing. They took in all information available, including leadership from the wider circles of our government. made available through the work on the No on D campaign and participating organizations. The landslide opposition to Measure D is a clear sign to our county leadership and elected officials that the majority of this community wants both rail and trail as soon as possible. And we urge the RTC to honor this directive and commit to seeking and applying for funding, prioritizing rail as our next transit project, moving away from highway building, which is neither environmentally sound or equitable for meeting our transit needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faulkner. And I think we will have just enough time to hear from the remaining 3 members of the public with their hand up before we move to our public hearing right around 9:30. So next up is Ms. Robin Belkin.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd just like to point out how rare it is to get 72% of public support for anything. So Measure D, I think, is just a resounding comment on what our community wants. And I feel it demonstrates that the community supports moving forward with the rail and the trail, and they outrightly reject Greenway's trail-only plan, their rail banking plan, and frankly, I and others are tired of Greenway's interference with the plan that has been in place and that the people clearly want. It seems Greenway has had a special seat at the table that isn't representative of our community, and I don't know why they're there. And I think hopefully it's clear to the RTC that they are not representative of what we want. So anyhow, I hope now the RTC will diligently pursue rail repairs, rail transit planning, and reject rail banking. I finally just want to strongly support Sally Arnold's comments just now. They are right on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belkin. Next up, Mark Johansson.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Koenig. Now that the residents of Santa Cruz County have given you a strong mandate to proceed with the planning for trail and rail, the next step is to proceed without delay to the next phase of the 2021 Transit Corridor Analysis, which is to prepare a business plan for the locally preferred alternative of electric or passenger rail and to seriously look at cost-effective rail alternatives. Not only did the voters resoundingly defeat Measure D, but they expressed a strong desire to implement rail in the near term and not decades from now. The Commission should now direct staff to line up the studies necessary to seek all funding available for rail and trail and to move projects forward. Also, it's not surprising to read in the Election Code Section 9111 report on Measure D that the passage of Measure D would have had no effect on housing or the ability of the region to meet its housing needs. And that is because rail has not been incorporated into the housing element and other elements of the county's general and specific plan. Also, that analysis said that the measure would have no effect on the ability to compete for affordable housing funds near a rail line. The reason is because passenger rail is not currently in operation. So all commissioners should arrange for a trip along the rail line and see for themselves the opportunity for high density housing along the line in many areas where that would make sense. For those city and county elected leaders who have a serious interest in addressing this region's housing needs, it would be critical that your district's general and specific plans be developed to integrate rail, transportation, and housing planning, and to create incentives for transit-oriented development along the line. We should be seeing how we can make passenger rail a reality and work toward a constructive discussions, including viable alternatives to rail banking, not continuing the path of saying no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johansson. Our final speaker this morning will be Ms. Judy Gittleton.
Hi, thank you, commissioners, for taking my call. I'm Judy Gittleton, and I am a Watsonville resident and a train fiend. And I look forward to you implementing what the voters want, which is a safe trail and rail and prioritizing. Please complete the repairs that are on your schedule, on your agenda, and reject rail banking fiercely, and then seek all funding. It is available. I hear daily about grants that are available, and I think that the priority is to obtain all available funds for this project post haste. And in my final few seconds, I'm just going to read you the poem that I wrote to you. It is, Dear Regional Transportation Commissioners, in response to our election, your role is firm action, track by track, trestle by trestle, train by train, trail by trail. Advance us in service, command us in earnest, bring your skills to the forefront, your work is important. Our trains and attraction, get funding, that's action. The former governor is listening, your directive is riveting. Make our trek stable, yes, yes, you are able. Transport us, support us, endear us, delight us. With all your might must you show up and build us. The tracks you're obliged to, because the votes demand of you. Wow and endorse us, the train will reward us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gittleson. We'll now proceed to our regularly scheduled public hearing at 9:30 a.m. It's item 26. I do apologize for any member of the public who still wishes to speak. You will have another opportunity at the end of our meeting to present oral communications for items not on the agenda. So again, we'll proceed to item 26, public hearing on Measure D of 2016 Community Bridges Lift Line 5-year plan. And for a report on this item, we have Ms. Rachel Morricone, our Senior Transportation Planner with the RTC.
Good morning, commissioners and members of the community. As noted, we're now going to switch back in time to the 2016 Measure D, which was approved by 2/3 of Santa Cruz County voters. That is a half-cent sales tax, which provides critical funding to maintain and expand transit and paratransit services for seniors and people with disabilities, maintain and improve our local roads and highways, our rail corridor, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities. So before you today is the Measure D 5-year program of projects for Community Bridges Lift Line, showing how it plans to use its formula allocation of 4% of Measure D revenues from fiscal year 2022-23 through fiscal year 26-27 for paratransit services for seniors and people with limited mobility, as shown in Exhibit A of the resolution. The Measure D ordinance approved by voters requires each agency receiving Measure D revenues to prepare and annually hold a public hearing on their planned use of Measure D funds for the next 5 years. Lift Line serves as the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency for Santa Cruz County and provides paratransit services for folks to get to medical appointments, meal sites, groceries, and other locations. Since Lift Line is the only agency receiving a direct allocation of Measure D funds that is not a public agency, the Regional Transportation Commission oversees approval of the 5-year plan. Lift Line's 5-year plan includes additional drivers, training and outreach and administration to expand its service to the weekends and later hours, which was not possible before Measure D went into effect. It also includes funding for its new operations facility in Watsonville and funding to leverage grants to purchase new vehicles, including electric vehicles, as well as the equipment and upgrades to its maintenance and operations facility needed to support those vehicles. These projects address several of the priorities that were identified in the unmet transit needs list that was adopted by this board at your May meeting. And the Regional Transportation Commission's Elderly and Disabled Transportation Advisory Committee reviewed Lift Line's proposed use of Measure D funds at its May 2020 meeting and recommends that the RTC approves the 5-year plan as proposed by Lift Line. Staff recommends that you hold a public hearing to give the public an opportunity to provide input on Lift Line's proposal and then adopt by resolution the Measure D 5-year plan as shown in Attachment 1 in Exhibit A. Doug Underhill and Jesus Borriguez from Community Bridges Lift Line Paratransit Services are available to answer any questions that you might have on the specific proposals in their plan. And with that, I'll turn it back to you for any questions you might have of staff or Lift Line staff.
Thank you, Ms. Morricone. Are there any questions from members of the commission? Seeing none, I'll officially open the public hearing. Any member of the public wishes to address us on this item, please raise your hand. I see a hand raised by Ms. Margie Biddick. Please proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to comment on Measure D. Is this the appropriate time to do so?
I'm afraid not. This is for comments on the 2016 Measure D and Community Bridges Lift Line 5-year plan. We do all have another opportunity to comment on the recent election at the end of our meeting, which
I will do that. I forgot to lower my hand. My apologies.
All right, no worries. Thank you very much. Mr. Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian from Trail Now. Thank you. We absolutely support Lift Line. You know, my mother died of ALS a year ago, and she was a big user of Lift Line. It was a game changer for her. It was interesting. The difficulty was getting her to initiate that use. Once she got comfortable with it, it worked fabulous. It's probably one of the best metro programs we have for our community because it's from the point A of where they're at to point B to the doctors. There's no fixed rail system that can support that. There's no bus system that can support it. Lift Line works really well for that. So fully support it. One other note, Measure D, 2016 Measure D originally came out with 24% funding for the train. And we came out as a political action committee opposed to Measure D because of that. The language in Measure D 2016 was changed prior to the election, shifting the rail to only 8% and moving those monies to Lift Line where it belonged. And we are seeing the results of that. And after the language was shifted, Trail Now became a supporter, and our supporters gave the most funding for Measure D, 2016 Measure D. And 2016 Measure D has been a game changer for our community. We're able to widen the highway, we're able to invest in our roads, and we have been able to invest in Lift Line. So thumbs up on Lift Line. The only suggestion I would give is more advertising and more outreach to bring more customers to it. We're a big promoter, and thank you for the work, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Last call for members of the public wishing to address us on this item. All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and return it to the commission for comments and action. I see a hand from Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Koenig. I really think on Measure D of 2016, everybody can say it passed because this was included. And this is one significant element of Measure D 2016 that allowed it to be approved by county voters, by more than 2/3 of county voters. This is a tremendous part of Measure D 2016. I want to continue to say the year. And I think it's a tremendous program, a great presentation by Ms. Marconi. And I would move the recommended actions to approve the 5-year program of projects that were listed.
Second. I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner McPherson, second by, I believe that was Commissioner Schifrin. All right, and then our next comment is Commissioner Rotkin.
Yeah, I wanted to start, I support the motion that's on the floor. I wanted to start by just clarifying to the public, after Brian Peoples' comment, there may be some confusion. We have two kinds of paratransit service in the county. One of them is the one that we're looking at now, and that's the Lift Line project that's run by Community Bridges. That's a service that takes up people not for any kind of ride, but for specific kinds of purposes that include medical visits, shopping visits, and there's another one, I'm forgetting what it is, but there's specific ones. Those rides are free, as I understand it, and people who are income eligible and otherwise need those kinds of rides can work those out with Lift Line. The Metro Transit System also runs a paratransit service that's open to members of the public with disabilities and have to be certified that you have either elderly or disabilities, particularly disability situation that requires you to use that service rather than the fixed route buses. Those rides will take you anywhere for any purpose. You could be visiting a friend or whatever else you like. And we do charge for those rides. We actually charge twice the cost of what it would be to take a ride on a fixed route bus line. So the public should be aware that what we're looking at this morning is part of the paratransit option that's available to people in this county. But I think Brian's comments about Metro service kind of conflated. I'm not sure which service his mother used, but it could be either of those two kinds of services that are out there. I just wanted to try and clarify that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rockton. Commissioner Bertrand.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd just like to comment as an elected official. I've heard that these two available services are, very important for situations of those who actually need them for a variety of reasons. And so I think many of us are elected, and when we hear from the public that it meets a need, we know we spent the money wisely. And when I was on the senior council, I did work to get this expanded funding, and I'm glad it did. And I'm glad that they're using their money wisely to go electric and make sure that their facilities can meet the challenge of keeping their services operational. So I think this is a wise spending of money, and I think us as elected officials on D and all our other variety of councils are doing our job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Bertrand. All right, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner McPherson and a second by Commissioner Schifrin to approve the resolution and the Community Bridges Lift Line Measure D 5-year program of projects. Is there any further discussion? None. Clerk, roll call vote, please.
I just wanted to start off by apologizing to Commissioner Brandy Ryder. I did not include her on the roll call, but she is present. Commissioner Bertrand?
I agree.
Commissioner Sandy Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commission Alternate Hurst?
Aye.
Commissioner Alternate Hernandez? Commission Alternate Schifrin?
Aye.
Commissioner Alternate Quinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig?
Aye.
Commissioner McPherson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kristen Brown? Oh, I think she's still here. I think we may have lost her.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are, yes.
Yes, I vote aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Parker? And Commissioner Rotkin.
Aye.
That was unanimous.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Marconi and the Lift Line team for being available for questions. We'll now proceed to item 27, adoption of the findings, statement of overriding considerations, and mitigation monitoring and reporting program as required by CEQA guidelines, and adoption of the 2045 Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Plan. For presentation on this item, we have Transportation Planner Amy Naranjo. Amy, take it away. Mr. Naranjo, we cannot hear you at the moment. If you are trying to speak.
There we go. Sorry, my my audio was turned off here. Let's get my video on. There we go. All right, and you can see my screen?
We can hear you, we can see you. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you and good morning, commissioners and members of the public. My name is Amy Naranjo, and I'm a transportation planner for the RTC. So the RTC has prepared the final 2045 Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Plan. This plan describes the existing transportation system network, forecasts the amount of forecasts the amount of funding anticipated for transportation projects, and identifies transportation programs and projects to advance the region's goals over the next 22 years.
Projects identified in the 2045 RTP include maintenance of and improvements to local roadways, highways, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, transit service, specialized transportation for seniors and people with disabilities, and transportation demand management programs. Throughout the development of the RTP, staff has solicited the input of the RTC advisory committees, partner agencies, project sponsors, and members of the public at key milestones during the review and approval of the policy element, the financial element, and the action element, which define the financially constrained project list. At the March 3rd meeting, the RTC accepted the final draft of the 2045 RTP. And today's staff is recommending adoption of the final 2045 RTP, as well as the EIR findings. So the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, or AMBAG, develops the Long-Range Transportation Plan, referred to as the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP, for the Monterey Bay Area Tri-County region, including Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties. AMBAG combines the Sustainable Community Strategy, or the SCS, along with the MTP. So as required by the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, both the MTP SCS and the Santa Cruz County RTP require environmental review. AMBAG is the lead agency for preparation of the EIR, and the 3 regional transportation planning agencies, including the RTC, serve as the responsible agencies under CEQA. AMBAG certified the final EIR for the 2045 MTP SCS yesterday at their June 15th AMBAG Board of Directors meeting. The final EIR includes additional language that addresses public comments received and includes all the responses to the comments that were received as well. Details regarding the potential environmental impacts of the 2045 RTP are available in the findings and statement of overriding conditions, which are included in your packet as attachment 2, Exhibit A. This document provides specific reasons why the benefit of a proposed project outweighs the adverse effects, including the discussion of social, economic, and environmental benefits of the project, and why alternatives, although feasible from a technical standpoint, are rejected. So today, staff is recommending that the RTC consider the following. 1, consider the final environmental impact report for the 2045 RTP. 2, adopt the resolution that adopts the findings, statement of overriding considerations, and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program related to the EIR that was certified by AMBAG as the lead agency under CEQA for the 2045 RTP. And then finally, approve a resolution adopting the final 2045 RTP. And so that concludes my staff report. I'm happy to take your questions. Heather Adamson, AMBAG Planning Director, is also on the call, and as well as George Sticks from Rincon Consulting, and they can answer any questions that are related specifically to the EIR. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ronho. Other questions from members of the commission? I see, recognize Commissioner Rotkin.
I just wanted to ask when's the next time we would be updating this plan?
We'll likely start work on the next RTP probably in the coming months after we're done with this RTP.
So we advance this every year by 1 year, effectively? Is that how that works? As opposed to every 5 years, or how often does it actually get reconsidered as a plan? And then have a new EIR done on it?
Yeah, the RTP is done every 4 years. And it's typically a multi-year process in the development of this. So the work for this RTP started in 2019, and we're finishing today, June 16, 2022. So it takes a considerable amount of time. And in the process for the next RTP will likely be a major update. And so that work will likely start happening, I'm assuming, in the next couple of months.
Okay, well, then the comment I have, Commissioner Koenig, is that there are some issues raised about the fact that this plan doesn't really incorporate any kind of rail stuff into it by a couple of members of the public. I got emails about that. I'm fine approving this plan today. I think the next time we'll get to look at the overall pictures, it certainly happened before we're anywhere near rail service. And it was pointed out that the reason that the AMBAG doesn't include the rail issues is because at this point there's no integration in the county plan of the impacts of if we do build a rail project, and that might be before 45. It won't be next year, it won't be the next 4 years, but it might be before 45. And the question would be, that we don't include the, say, housing opportunities that are opened up by use of a possible rail line and other kinds of things like that. Since it's not in the county plan or city plans, in their housing elements and so forth, the AMBAG doesn't incorporate those into the question of what kind of transportation systems necessary to serve those uses. So I don't think it'd be almost premature. In fact, it would be premature at this point to try and speculate about what that might look like when we're so far away from actually getting a real rail program, even if we're successful with that. I'm fine with approving the plan that's in front of us now, but we should be clear in response to these comments from the public, and we'll probably get some more of them now. I hope not a whole lot, because I don't think there's much we can do about it in the short term, but I think that we need to address those in the next time we look at a major revision of this plan, probably, as it sounds like, probably in about 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Rotkin. Executive Director Preston, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I did want to make a comment regarding why rail transit was not on the the constrained list and included in the EIR analysis. We had considerable discussion with AMBAG about trying to get it on to the constrained list. To do so, we would have to model local funding for that in order to open up the doors to the state and federal funding. So we would have to model about the equivalent of a 50-cent sales tax in order to be able to do so. We could have done that in the last this RTP cycle, but if we did not make progress in passing a sales tax in that period of time, we would then have to remove it for the next cycle, which would be this coming cycle that you're talking about. So if that's something that the commission would like to see done, it'll be good to get that direction so that we can include it in the next cycle.
Thank you, Director Preston. Ms. Heather Adamson, did you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, I just had a couple comments on the land use related comments. Like Amy said, AMBAG also will be beginning our process to update a bigger update for the next cycle, which will be scheduled for adoption in 2026. The first step is to look at our land use assumptions and modeling, and that will begin next year in 2023. That will coincide with all the jurisdictions updating their housing elements, which are due in December 2023. So we will have that new land use information related to new housing and where it will be sited. And that information will go into our next MTP and, of course, be included in a future EIR. As for the rail, it isn't as Executive Director Preston mentioned, it is included on our unconstrained list. If something were, and for reasons that he mentioned, we had a lot of discussion about this. If something were to change in the next couple of years, prior to us releasing the draft next update of the transportation plan in 2025, we have done a mid-cycle amendment in the past and recirculated a supplemental EIR for other projects in other counties, and so that's not unheard of. If something were to move really quickly and on the rail project and we needed that before, of course that could be evaluated and done mid-cycle, but nothing prohibits you from working on the rail planning in any direction just because it's not identified as a constrained project. It is in the plan. We would just need to do additional work to move it from unconstrained to a constrained, and that would include additional environmental analysis. Or it can just be done as part of our regular update cycle that will start next year. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Adamson. Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think transit-oriented housing is exactly where this conversation should go in the future. That's all I need to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
Enough said. All right, thank you, Commissioner McPherson. Any further questions or comments from members of the commission? Seeing none, we'll open it for public comment. Mr. Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian from Trail Now. Thank you, Amy. Great report. It's interesting. The mitigation plans that you call out, a lot of them are reason we're having the mitigation requirements is because we're trying to accommodate a train that will never show up. Segment 7, we're destroying heritage trees. You're excavating into the hillside. The North Coast farmland is going to be destroyed because you're going to have a trail next to the old tracks. I would ask Mr. Rotkin to say, why are we doing that? Why are we destroying farmland when we have a perfect corridor for an old railroad tracks? Look at Harkins Slough. The wetlands are going to be destroyed when you try to have 60 trains a day and a trail going through there. It's not realistic. So when you have an EIR and you have mitigation plans, you need to follow through with them. You're actually imposing more detriment to the community because of the idea that you're going to have a train in the future, and in reality you won't. The idea that we're going to have this huge fixed rail system, it feels like you're trying to make us like San Jose or San Francisco. Our community doesn't want to grow and become a huge, major, overbearing with population. The idea of having 60 trains a day flying through Manresa Beach, flying through La Selva, 20 feet from the Pacific Ocean, it's going to be real difficult to get any type of funding for that. You're not going to get the support for 60 trains a day speeding through our community. So let's have a plan for transit and trail. Let's have transit on the corridor so that our community can begin using that corridor in a realistic manner. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pico. Drink Praxel.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Koenig and other commissioners. I want to speak for FORT, Friends of Rail Trail, to reiterate some of the points that we made in a letter we sent in that really support what Mike Rotkin has said this morning. That we really feel that this plan needs to be updated now, since Measure D has made it clear what the Santa Cruz residents' mandate for rail and trail along the rail line. And there are a number of places where these ERI findings find significant and unavoidable impacts on greenhouse gas reduction and unavoidable delays in daily VMTs. So we would like to recommend that the commission look at the most environmentally superior alternative 3, infill and transit. And this should be looked at further as really being the best environmentally friendly approach, which was also mentioned by one of the commissioners. So thank you for considering that.
Thank you, Ms. Praxel. Next up, Mr. Jack Nelson.
Thank you. This is Jack Nelson. And I'd first just like to call your commissioners' attention to your correspondence on this item in your item handout, including from Fort and also from Rick Longinati of Campaign for Sustainable Transportation. That one pointing out that with this EIR, vehicle miles traveled per capita will increase. So that alone should be a red flag to your commission that something is wrong with this RTP. This RTP, if I may use my brief moments to speak truth to power, this RTP is a local suicide pact on climate. This will not address our climate need in the future, and future generations will look back and, unless you change course, will condemn your actions on this plan. So I think some of you are probably considering this just a procedural formality today to adopt this plan. But I'm here to tell you, commissioners, this is wrong. This is a crime against humanity to grow the greenhouse gases emitted from our transportation system in Santa Cruz County. It's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Next up, Robin Belkin.
Hi, I'm just weighing in on the last comment. I agree. The bureaucratic foot dragging in this community when we've had this resounding 72% overwhelming support for rail and trail has got to be addressed more quickly. We do need to update the plan now, and it is urgent. I just find this so frustrating. I hear comments from staff that if something changes, you can always work on the rail. And yes, something has changed. You have overwhelming community support for this, and you can't put it off till 2025 or whenever you're planning on doing that. It needs to start immediately. We have a huge community will right now. Let's do what it takes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belkin. Next up, Ryan Sarnataro.
You heard it from Guy Preston that a train is going to require a sales tax increase. You know that you can't get a sales tax increase through the county when only 6,000 people a day are going to use that train, and you have 250,000 people in the county. So this whole idea that you're going to bend your EIR to accommodate something that is politically impossible, not to mention the ecological and other impacts of it that make a train a poor option for, not even a realistic option. So I just want to point that out and make sure that the commissioners understand that their place in this is to speak truth to ignorance, and that ignorance is being expressed in the community. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean stupidity. I mean, they just don't really understand what the choices are here. They want the beautiful train that flies in the air, but it's not possible. And as soon as we can actually ground to the fact that we do have in that corridor an option to provide at least some level of transportation and possibly a way to orient it so that future transportation options, as they emerge from our ever-advancing technology, will be able to be deployed flexibly, that's where you need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarnataro. Next up, Mr. Barry Scott.
Thank you, Chair Koenig, and I want to thank Commissioner Rotkin for his comments about infill and a transit focus with housing infill, and I think the half-cent sales tax assumption is premature. What we haven't done is pursue a business plan that looks at lighter vehicles, a streetcar option, which is included in our list of options, that might be significantly less expensive than the earlier studies that looked at heavier vehicles, more expensive vehicles. It required 2 staff members to operate, for example. And so I think we need to be really careful about foreclosing on opportunities here, and I wish we could include some funding as constrained for development of rail transit planning, consistent with all of the studies that we've done, and public sentiment toward transit on this corridor. And there's no question but that rail transit is the right transit alternative for the corridor. It's a question of what size should that be and what kinds of funding opportunities exist. And I think an earlier rejection of a public-private partnership is similarly premature. Many excellent public transit programs and transportation investments generally are nationally are public-private partnerships of some sort. So I hope we can preload our regional transportation plans with anticipation of some kind of rail transit on that corridor, because we don't have time to defund it or second guess it. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next up, Lonnie Faulkner.
I thank you, Commissioners. Equity Transit agrees with Mike Rotkin's proposal to please revisit this plan prioritizing rail transit. We're concerned that the 2045 RTP does not reflect public views of our transportation future, nor does the 2045 RTP reflect our decades plus efforts and funding, which led us to the approval of the TCAA study, indicating that clean passenger rail is our next transit priority, which meets equity and environmental requirements not met through further highway widening proposed in the 2045 RTP. Similar to our progress with rail, future highway funding is not currently funded. Funding for highway widening would need to be acquired through grants, bonds, and other sources not yet identified. There are proven creative financing options to bring rail to our community that do not necessitate requiring a sales tax increase and have been done in cities like Portland. Public-private partnerships, as Barry Scott just mentioned, were also mentioned at the Global Glasgow Summit as an excellent way to move forward with creative financing for such projects. The resounding defeat of the 2022 Measure D Greenway initiative indicates a clear mandate to continue to integrate and emphasize rail and trail planning and projects along the Santa Cruz Coast Rail Line. The statement of overriding considerations is deeply concerning as the list of 44 serious and drastic unmitigated environmental impacts, including the plan's inability to meet long-term state greenhouse gas reduction targets and significant and unavoidable increases in daily vehicle miles traveled per capita, should sound a very loud alarm for the RTC and for our community. EIR Alternative 3 infill and transit was determined to be the environmentally superior alternative that was rejected primarily because AMBAG does not have the land use authority and cannot require local agencies to make major changes to the general plan. We need to do everything we can do quickly to mitigate climate change by prioritizing all forms. Thank you.
Next up, Michael Sain.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. I wasn't going to speak on this subject, but I really do want to second the opinions of Jack Nelson and also the last speaker that spoke. I look at these metropolitan transportation plans or regional transportation plans, and if you take them in a general sense, basically, all they tend to do is try to mitigate and make excuses for widening highways and increasing greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. I went back to the 2005 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which was supposed to be through 2035. And we had approximately 80% was our mode transportation for cars. The rest was biking, walking, metro, etc. Well, presently it's the same. I mean, nothing has happened since 2005, and it's just another bunch of lots of hundreds of pages of excuses for not doing the right thing. Very disappointing. I would not pass this. I know it's going to get a little bit more bigger issue in the next 3 to 4 years, but like one of the speakers said, we don't have time to wait. We need to get something going on both corridors. Whatever it is, transfer money, look for funding, get both corridors going. The rail trail was something small, like Mr. Scott was saying, and then also go to the dedicated bus on shoulder system on the highway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sain. Next up, Ben Vernassa.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I just want to make a few comments about what's going on in the Bay Area. The Bay Area has now a group of all the people in, or the transportation commissions in that area, to build and complete a 2,600 mile trail around the Bay Area. How about that? And they're going to go and get some of that trail money that the state set aside. Now that's a lot of miles. That's between here and maybe to Chicago. The other thing that's really happened that's important is the Bay Bridge is adding a bicycle lane. They estimate, listen to this, they estimate that the traffic that will be eliminated, the car traffic and so forth, eliminated, will be equivalent to 1 lane. Now that's quite important. So I just want you to all keep this in mind, that there's trail money out there now by the state, and we need a trail, especially in Mid-County, we need a trail. And also from Watsonville to the beaches, we need a trail. Now, what you've done on the north side is build trails that are monsters. They're unsafe and so forth. Anyway, I wanted to bring you up to date on that because it's very important what they're doing in the Bay Area that we're not doing. So let's go get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanessa. All right, seeing no further members of the public with their hands raised, I'll return it to the commission for action. Commissioner Rotkin.
Move approval of the staff recommended resolution, and I do have comments, but I'll wait for a second.
Is there a second?
Second. McPherson. Second.
All right, great. We have a motion by Commissioner Rotkin and a second by Commissioner McPherson to adopt the staff recommendation. And Commissioner Rotkin, please.
So I wanted to start by actually thanking and even praising Bud Colligan, one of the leaders of Greenway, for his early concession comments as a result of the way fewer than half of the votes were in. Recognizing that there was a clear statement being made by the public. Unfortunately, not all of, and that's to say the leadership of Greenway, as far as I understand it. But a lot of Greenway supporters have not got the message yet, and we've been hearing from some of them this morning, which people want to suggest, the vote meant this, people didn't know what they were doing, blah, blah, blah. I'm afraid that's not an adequate response, and I thought Mr. Colligan's response was much more admirable in terms of, that there's something, people have said something and we do have an answer, and it's not a complete answer, but a much better answer than we did before about what people want us to do. But I want to say that when people are saying, the comments this morning that we're not taking action fast enough, climate change is a problem. I certainly share the view that we need to move as quickly as we can. But there's no way this agency, the Regional Transportation Commission, can sort of adopt a strategy for how we're going to use rail to address all kinds of issues, short of knowing what the land uses are going to be along the final line, the way that it happens. That takes a little bit of time for that to develop. We can't impose that on the county or the cities in our county. And so that was why I made the comment earlier that it makes sense to wait, to our next revision of this, when some of those agencies might begin, when they think about the rail potential, begin to actually move on their housing projects. I want to point out, and this is a response to the person, I think it was Ryan Saratano, who points out that the study that we did, the TCAA, shows only 6,000 riders on the train and so forth. That's a result of the fact that when Ronald Reagan was president, before Ronald Reagan was president, when you did a proposal for transportation planning of some kind, you were able to project the use of that project in terms of what it would look like after it was constructed, how many people would use it at that point. What the Reagan administration did was change the federal rules so that they won't give you any federal money if the planning you do is based on projections of the ridership you would have when you complete the project. It has to be based on who would take it today, right now, if it just were plopped down on them or something, in terms of where's the existing housing uses and other public uses. And that's how you get this number of only 6,000 people are going to use it, and therefore it doesn't make any difference and it doesn't affect anything. But clearly we need to begin at least thinking about this at the local level in terms of what the ultimate potential is for housing development and other kinds of public uses and so forth along this line when it actually, transportation line, when it actually gets constructed. And so that's why I think I made the motion to approve this today, but I'm arguing that, we don't we're not going to be able to incorporate the impacts of rail, snapping our fingers and telling our staff, just do it, make it happen. It requires a lot of other agencies to take some actions for us to be able to do that in a legal and constructive way. So that I wanted to explain my motion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rockin. Commissioner Hurst.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too think we should move forward, and we should move forward in the most positive way we can. And I'm glad we're looking at what other agencies are doing, because transportation just doesn't stop at the city limits or the county line. We should have that all-encompassing view in whatever we can do. And so I'm glad to hear that there's an emphasis on partnerships and future planning. What we do today and what we did yesterday does affect the future, and it's time that we get moving and prepare for a brave new world that, we don't know how it's going to shape in many respects. But looking at what other agencies and partnering up with other agencies and trying to really meet the needs of the people, that's what we should be all about. And so thanks for helping us get moving.
Thank you, Commissioner Hurst. Commissioner Schifrin.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to support the motion. One reason is that if we don't have an approved regional transportation plan, the funding for all our projects are threatened. Secondly, I never think of the RTP as being substantively all that important, because as the representative for AMBAG said, it can be changed at any time. It meets federal and state requirements, but ultimately, if the commission wants to move forward on a project that isn't in the plan, it can do so. It just needs to amend the plan. And we've done that in the past. I do think, listening to some of the public comments, any hope that hyperbole will be notched down after the election is gone. I could take issue with a number of speakers who have, from my perspective, over-dramatized the reality. But since I've worked on, and the segment 5 trail segment is in the 3rd district of the county, the comments that segment is going to destroy agricultural land on the North Coast, it needs to be responded to. It's taking hyperbole to the max. The impact on agricultural land is extremely minor, and it will not affect the viability of the land that is used for farming on the North Coast. So I do think, though, that the commission's going to have to do things a little differently as a result of the election. From my perspective, substantively, the election really wasn't about anything. Politically, it was about sending a message. And the message was, does the commission does the public want to remove the tracks from the rail line to build a trail or not? And I think we've heard very clearly that the public does not want to remove the tracks. Well, I think the commission needs to listen to that. It's consistent with what the commission has done over the decades. It's consistent with the commission's decision on the TCAA. It's on the Unified Corridor Study. Those all supported using the corridor for public transit. And I think the voters have given a resounding support for that direction. There are a couple of consequences that are not really on our agenda today, but I think we're going to need to talk about them. And I think that has to do with mid-county segments and whether it really makes sense to consider an interim, what's being called an interim trail, as feasible, given this vote. Is the commission really going to seriously consider an adverse abandonment on the line and after this vote? If it's not, and I think there's a very strong case that the interim trail option is not feasible and should be dropped from the EIR as an infeasible option. I think at least we should consider that. I also have been concerned about the misuse of the term, from my perspective, ultimate trail. It's not the ultimate trail. It's the preferred option in our rail trail plan that was adopted unanimously by this commission and was approved by the various the various cities. So from my perspective, we need to continue to do what we have been doing and moving forward with the trail. And I think the public, as I see the vote, the public strongly supports having that trail move forward. At the same time, I think we need to be more vigorous in our support for the potential of rail. And I think that's not before us today, but certain community members had said, well, maybe we really need to do the business plan. I don't know whether that would be helpful or not, but I think the results of Measure D does justify a discussion on what more the commission can be doing to try to move funding for a public transit rail alternative forward. So I would urge that come back on our agenda sometime in the not too distant future, so we can really have a chance to talk about and focus on whether the commission is going to be willing to do anything different than it's done before, and if so, what? Because I think we've received a very loud message, and I hope the commission is going to be willing to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schiffman. Commissioner Hernandez.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments. I'm going to see too if we can look at the business plan with light rail, if indeed we didn't look at that option, and get back on track and move forward with this planned RTP as well. Later on, maybe see if we can add an addendum or revise the future plan. But yeah, I agree with this. Move forward with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bertrand.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Koenig. I'm actually not too sure which way forward the community has told us to go. But I am sure one thing is that this community is divided on how to implement a vision that we substantiated a long time ago when we bought the corridor. And I know my concept of the vision has changed. I remember Des Norton was our representative from the City Council of Capitola, and he asked me to make a statement, and I did. I made a statement before the Board of Supervisors in support of this. At that time, I had a different vision, which I won't go over in terms of what I said. But I've been cognizant of the fact that the more I learned about what is being anticipated in terms of making the vision a reality has tempered how I've approached things. So visions can be approached from a variety of perspectives. Some people approach it from, they've had a lot of experience in this world of trying to accomplish things. My background tends to think of things in terms of hard casting of elemental things that make things possible. That's funding, that's infrastructure, that's a whole variety of issues, whether they're environmental, equity issues, the reality being able to get the public to support it. Or people have a vision, especially when I was younger, is very aspirational. You are motivated by things that need to be corrected. You are motivated by things that need to be addressed because the world is not right, because we're not doing our part in addressing those things. And these things are very real considerations. What I just mentioned are very real considerations for the younger community and those to see a future, perhaps for themselves and perhaps for their kids. Visions need to be a compromise. Visions need to be approached from both angles so that the reality for our community and for the people that we represent can be realized. The other aspect that I think about a lot right now, and our world is in transition, it's an inflection point. we're sort of at the top. We're approaching the top of the hill. We don't know what the possibilities of the future are going to entail, but what they're going to offer us. And, you know, I think Mike has even mentioned, and I mentioned this before, we don't know what technology is going to give us to solve our problems. And I will support this, what's on the agenda right now, we're going to vote on pretty soon. I don't think we're ready to take into account all the things that we will be able to bring to bear to solve our current problems. But we are in development of those things. And the next plan, I think, will hopefully bring some of those things in. One thing I would like to ask our council, our commission to do is to be more involved with AMBAG. I think that if we're going to have our part in making these changes, this is my last point, we should be more involved over the next 4 years. I appreciate Heather, I appreciate her staff. You know, it is an effort that it's extreme and it's very hard to put together. And it's been mentioned that this is something that's required of us. But I think maybe it's also required of us as a local agency involved in transportation to be more involved in this. Yes, we're focused on transportation. We have that part. We're not in housing. We're not in other things that are addressed in the plan. But I think in terms of, I just put forward to the commission that in terms of our responsibility, maybe we should be more responsible by being involved ahead of time. And so those are my 3 comments, and I am in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bertrand. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. I just wanted to make a quick comment here. I had some comments that I was planning to make, but I think I'm going to just leave those aside. We don't need to hear another round of speech on what the way forward. I think that, you know, the results of Measure D speak for themselves in my mind. And I just want to say that I do support moving forward along the lines that I've heard several commissioners raise today. Commissioner Rotkin and Commissioner Schifrin, I think, followed up on that. I do think that we have a responsibility to be responsive to the public and to move forward in a way that takes those, you know, that clear message into account. And I do think that the action we're taking today, while I do not support highway widening, and you know, I've hung in there. I've supported moving forward with the overall planning process through the regional transportation plan. I'll do so again today. But I also believe that, you know, when we're looking at the whole picture, as I think the RTP ought to reflect, and it doesn't currently, and I hope it will in the future. I recognize the urgency, as Jack Nelson and others have said. But I want us to think about the difference in the conversation about the highway versus the rail corridor. And we always seem to be, you know, it just strikes me that we always seem to be in talking in austerity mode when it comes to the rail corridor. And I think we all, and myself included, have sort of internalized that and kind of accept it. We never speak that way when it comes to the highway, which is a extremely expensive project, which I believe is not in our interest due to climate realities and for many, many reasons, induced demand being a big one. But I think we ought to start thinking about like getting out of that mindset of austerity mode when it comes to thinking about our rail corridor. And so I just wanted to say that today. I hope others are ready to have that conversation, and I look forward to having that conversation in the coming months. So I'll leave it there. And thanks everyone for all of your work to keep us moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Quinn.
Thank you. First of all, I'll be supporting it also, and I'm greatly reassured by Director Preston's comments about the flexibility it allows us to moving forward. Second thing I'll say is, in probably response to the many, many emails I've received about Measure D,
I think obviously we need to be aware of it and recognize it and acknowledge it. I also want to thank Mr. Preston and the team for their continued diligence in taking, our beliefs and our aspirations and matching them with the reality, the scientific facts, the engineering facts, and the barriers ahead. And I think that will be an increasingly important role for the RTC going forward, is matching, what we're hearing are the beliefs and the wishes of the public with the realities that are out there, the fiscal constraints, the pros and cons of everything. And I look forward to weighing the pros and cons very deliberately in a data-driven way going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Quinn. Any other comments by members of the commission? Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to compliment Mike Rodkin for his comments maybe a couple of months ago, when lots and lots of people wanted to go sideways on the commitment of what Measure D stood for and where the pots of money were going to go. And when people said, we don't want widening of the highway, we don't want any money going into asphalt, he reminded them that that was part of the bargain. So anybody who wants to kind of renege on the tenets of Measure D, do so at your own risk, because was what the people voted for. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Any further comments? I'll just add a couple of comments. First off, I thoroughly agree with Commissioner McPherson that the three words most important are transit-oriented development. And I want to remind everyone that the county is in the process of a sustainability update, which really lays the groundwork for that, particularly in the urban area of the unincorporated county. And it will help us in the coming year to update our housing element with the over 4,000 units being asked of us through the RENA process by the state. I'm completely committed to ensuring we get the most out of our urban infill projects and transit-oriented development. And that's why I've worked with Commissioner McPherson to bring forward additional recommendations to improve our transportation demand management programs and encourage that kind of development within the county. Since many others have spoken about Measure D, I'll make a few comments now about that as well. It's clear Measure D lost by a large margin, and that voters did not want to change the county general plan. I think it's important to recognize that the rejection of Greenway's proposed solution does not mean that our problems are solved. This no vote doesn't make the corridor wider, doesn't fix any of our trestles, and it does not deliver money needed to build and operate a train. My goal has always been to help our community solve problems, not to create them. And so if this commission wants to explore solutions using the relatively small amount of tax money set aside for maintaining the corridor, let's do it. I am happy to consider a passenger rail EIR or bonding to complete as much maintenance on the rail corridor as possible, or finding ways to conduct a passenger rail test. When it comes to applying for state money, we have submitted grant applications for roughly $100 million to build the next segments of the trail and keep the tracks. We'll see how we do. We'll see if we can afford it. With the extreme negativity that has surrounded this issue, I don't think that we are in a position to get to yes on any solution at the moment. I believe a new tax measure to fund a train would have failed just as badly in this past election, and the way the city's sales tax is trending would suggest as much. My hope is that with this measure done, we can leave the negativity behind us, and that we can take a more collaborative approach as we encounter problems, that we can help each other over them rather than blame each other for them, and that we can take a scientific view and look for ways to prove ourselves wrong rather than selectively seeing the things that prove us right. That's the attitude that I'm going to bring to the table, and I hope my colleagues will too. With that, we have yes, Commissioner Schifrin, there's something else you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on your comments because I really appreciate them. I think it's really important that we move forward in a collaborative way here. I mean, there was a very strong message from the public, but in the end, I think people really share very similar goals in terms of wanting a trail that really serves the public. And I think people want transit that really serves the public. It's true. We don't know how to get there from here, and it's going to be difficult. But I think if we work together and try to look for solutions that extend the trail, try to move forward with identifying funding for the potential feasibility of public transit on the corridor. I am really hoping that we will get past the negativity and we'll be able to work collaboratively on solutions that are in line with what the Commission's been trying to do over the last decade. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion by Commissioner Rock and a second by Commissioner McPherson. Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bertrand?
I agree.
Commissioner Sandy Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commission Alternate Hurst?
Aye.
Commission Alternate Hernandez?
Yes.
Commission Alternate Schifrin?
Aye.
Commission Alternate Quinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig?
Aye.
Commissioner McPherson? Commissioner Kristen Brown? I think she might have left us. Commissioner Parker?
Yes.
And Commissioner Rotkin?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Well, with Commissioner Kristen Brown not voting. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Then the Commission has adopted the 2045 Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Plan. We'll now proceed back to the top of our agenda to item 3, the rest of the consent agenda. So that's items 3 through 22. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners on the consent agenda?
I move the consent agenda.
I'll wait for the public to.
Sorry. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. Well, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on items on the consent agenda? Michael Saint.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. Just to make a few comments, consent agenda item 6. Under projects and planning, I would like to thank the RTC, Director Preston and staff for their persistence and work in continuing the original goal of building the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail next to the tracks. The MBSST has always been the best plan and should continue to be the plan going forward. We look forward to the start of construction of this segment 7B later this summer. Continuing in the same thoughts, we wholeheartedly support the RTC once again and Director Preston on item number 21, A, B, and C. These letters sent to the Caltrans Grant Application Committee are vital in continuing construction of segment 8 and 9, safe routes to downtown Watsonville, and segments 10 and 11 of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary, Scenic Sanctuary Trail. In my humble opinion, this will deliver us a trail sooner than other alternatives and save taxpayers millions of dollars by focusing on one trail project, and that's the Monterey Bay Scenic Sanctuary Trail network next to the tracks. Thank all of you for your hard work and staying focused on this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saint. Brian Peoples.
Hi, this is Brian from Trail Now. I'll comment on item 6. So this is a good example of where we're spending a lot of our resources to accommodate a train that really isn't going to make ever come. And what that does is it pulls away valuable resources from other needed areas like Metro, like building the trail. We've only built 1.2 miles of trail in over a decade, spending on average $10 million a mile. This segment's not even a mile, and it's already over budget by $10 million. We did not support continuing to move forward with this segment because you're destroying trees. You're violating the 2045 transportation plan, the EIR, by imposing additional destruction of the corridor just to accommodate a train that will truly never come. What I would suggest people start to do is go out to a project of a rail system. I was just in Seattle. They're building this huge rail system it truly isn't realistic for our community. And what really is realistic is opening the coastal corridor now as a trail, as a transportation resource. So I just wanted to highlight again the burden that is being placed on our community by keeping the coastal corridor closed for decades and decades more if we continue to think that we're going to keep a train there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Karina McFarland.
Hi, thank you. And I'm never quite sure where it's okay to comment on particular things, but this is after the binary nature of Measure D initiative and the narrative distortion and the negativity. So Bloomberg, so national media, City Lab article on June 15th.
If you could just, there will be an opportunity for general public comment.
Okay, sorry.
Direct items to items on our consent agenda at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other members of the public that wish to speak, motion for action on the consent agenda.
Second Jock's motion, which he's about to make, I think.
Okay. We do have a motion by Commissioner Boucher and a second by Commissioner. I'll take that thumbs up as a reaffirmation of the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bertrand?
I agree.
Commissioner Sandy Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Alternate Hurst?
Aye.
Commissioner Alternate Hernandez?
Yes.
Commissioner Alternate Schifrin? Commissioner Alternate Quinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Koenig?
Aye.
Commissioner McPherson?
Aye.
Commissioner Parker?
Yeah, that's what we did with the student campaign. I bought all the middle states.
Hernandez, would you please mute?
Mine was the higher pitched voice. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. Commissioner Watkin?
Aye.
And Commissioner Alternate Schifrin?
I already said aye.
Oh, sorry about that. Didn't hear you. That was unanimous.
All right, thank you. The consent agenda being passed. Proceed to items 23, commissioner reports. Any member of the commission wish to share a report? Seeing none, Commissioner Rodkin.
Just quickly, I have a column, I think it will be in today's Lookout, what we call that, a magazine or whatever these online publications are called, suggesting next steps for the RTC. I'm not sure everybody will agree with me, that's for sure, but just to let people know that, at least I'm sure I'm not the only one from a commission thinking about what our next steps need to be given what's happened with the election. But I'm not going to take time to go over that now. People, you're welcome to read that and get some idea of where I'm at least trying to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodkin. Seeing no other commissioners, we'll proceed to item 24, the director's report. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. I'm going to start with a quick announcement. Since our next regularly scheduled RTC meeting is not until August 4th, RTC will be having a special RTC meeting on Thursday, July 21st at 9 a.m. The purpose of the meeting will be to make AB 361 findings within 30 days of the August 4th meeting, as required for the RTC to be able to continue to meet either virtually or in hybrid format. So commissioners should mark their calendars for July 21st and let their alternates know if you cannot attend. Our August meeting, we're considering having a hybrid meeting and having it in the Board of Supervisor chambers and also making it available virtually. It is a lot more work for staff. So if commissioners have comments on the desire to have that format, you can make those comments after I complete my report. The Association for Commuter Transportation brings together traffic demand management professionals from across the United States, Canada, and other countries. This year's conference will be in Chicago beginning on July 31st. Amanda Marino, who has been working on RTC's Cruise 511 program, will be attending the conference. Over the course of 4 days, the conference will include many informative and educational sessions on the state of the practice for traffic demand management programs. The conference will kick off with a session on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There will also be sessions on effective community engagement with purpose, healthy streets through Vision Zero, the future of telework, mobility strategic planning, improving transit, shuttle, and van pool ridership. I also want to call your attention to a couple items that were approved as part of today's consent agenda. The first, consent item number 9, the RTC will serve as the local access fund administrator for the Transportation Networks Companies, or TNC, Access for All program. And this is to improve the accessibility of transportation for persons with disabilities in Santa Cruz County. TNCs, those are the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world. They collect a 10% access fee as required by the CPUC, and RTC will now administer a program which will use that fee to provide an option for individuals in wheelchairs to call on a wheelchair accessible vehicle on demand. RTC still needs to be accepted by the state as the administrator, and it will take some time to get this program up and running. Staff will provide more information as the program is developed. Amanda Moreno will be staffing this new program. Also, with item 18, the commission approved the 2016 Measure D annual report for fiscal year 21. The Measure D Taxpayer Oversight Committee, or TOC, worked very hard to help produce the fiscal year annual report, which highlights the progress we have made in the delivery of the Measure D expenditure plan. And these are volunteers of our community. Highlights include the funding grants received due to the leveraging power of having a local revenue source. So thank you to the voters for passing 2016 Measure D, the TOC for volunteering their time to produce this report, and staff for their hard work and dedication in delivering the Measure D expenditure plan. I also want to mention that staff continues to monitor the federal and state budget process and work with legislators to ensure Santa Cruz County continues to have funding opportunities for its projects. On the federal level, RTC received notice from Congressmember Anna Eshoo that she has requested $2.5 million for the Boulder Creek Complete Streets Improvement Project. A letter to Chair Brown from Representative Anna Eshoo regarding the Boulder Creek project funding request is included in today's packet on page 21-1. I'm pleased to also announce that Senator Alex Padilla has requested that the fiscal year 23 federal budget includes $6.8 million for the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail, Coastal Rail Trail, and $3.5 million for preliminary engineering for the Scotts Creek Highway 1 Coastal Resiliency Project. The Senator's list also proposes funding for the Santa Cruz Metro Pacific Station Transit-Oriented Development of $4.9 million, Metro Paracruz facility of $5.5 million, and 6 new electric vehicles at about $229,000. While it is likely to be several months of negotiation before the federal appropriations bill is finalized, and it is common for most congressionally directed spending requests to not make it into the final budget, as it happened last year, we are very appreciative that Senator Padilla and Congressperson Eshoo have continued to identify these as priority projects, and staff will continue to push for a final budget that includes funding for these important transportation projects. On the state side, the California legislature met its June 15th constitutional deadline for passing a balanced state budget. The bill only represents an agreement between the two houses of the legislature, and further negotiations between the legislative leaders and Governor Gavin Newsom are expected before a final version of the state budget is approved and signed into law. While the next fiscal year starts on July 1st, the budget process will likely extend well beyond that date as lawmakers regularly pass follow-up measures amending provisions of their spending plan to reflect compromises with the governor throughout the summer. Both the governor and the legislature have proposed significant increases in funding for transportation infrastructure, including funding for transit, freight, ports, active transportation, climate adaptation, and other purposes. I have an announcement on a Highway 1 project advertisement. On June 6th, Caltrans advertised the Highway 1 41st Avenue to Soquel Drive Auxiliary Lane and Bus on Shoulder project for construction bids. The project will construct auxiliary lanes and a bus on shoulder facility in both directions of Highway 1 between the 41st Avenue and Soquel Drive interchanges in the city of Capitola and Live Oak, an unincorporated section of the county. The project also includes construction of a new bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing at Chanticleer Avenue. The project is funded by Measure D, State Transportation Improvement Program, Federal Highway Improvement Program, and Senate Bill 1 Solutions to Congested Corridor Funds with an engineer's estimate of $26 million. The bid opening is scheduled for late July. Construction is anticipated to begin later this year and take approximately 2 years to complete. RTC is very pleased to welcome Matthew Schroeder as the newest member of the RTC team. Matt began working on Monday as a Transportation Planner 1 and has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Environmental Studies with an emphasis in politics, policy, and justice from Seattle University. Matt also completed a Master's of Urban Planning degree at San Jose State University. Matt worked for over 3 years on the Safe Routes to School program for the City of Cupertino Public Works Department with the Traffic Engineering Division. There he worked on increasing travel to and from school by bike, walking, and transit, executed public outreach, and assisted in the implementation of Cupertino's bicycle and pedestrian transportation plans. Matt also assisted on the design, launch, and implementation of an on-demand microtransit shuttle service. At the Mineta Transportation Institute, Matt worked as a research assistant on a Caltrans contract to define transit equity and evaluate transit equity metrics. Matt also worked at the City of San Jose Department of Transportation Planning Division as a graduate intern, where he assisted with planning, design, data collection, analysis, and public outreach for various bike travel improvement projects and for micro-mobility implementation. Matt is a member of the American Planning Association. Matt is already working with the website update team to implement GIS visualization tools and strategies for the information that is available to the public on RTC's projects and programs. He will also be working with Senior Planner Rachel Morcone on the Santa Cruz County Transportation Equity Action Plan, funded with a recently secured Sustainable Communities grant from Caltrans. So welcome, Matthew. And with that, I conclude my director's report.
Thank you, Director Preston. Are there any questions from members of the commission? Commissioner Schifrin.
Yes, I wanted to respond to the executive director's request for feedback on having hybrid meetings. While it's definitely will be an inconvenience to have to leave the comfort of my home to go to commission meetings, I think it's important for the public, members of the public who can make it to a commission meeting and who want to make it and actually speak to people in person to have that opportunity. So I know that only 5 commissioners can be at the hybrid meeting at the Board of Supervisors chambers because of the limited size. But I think, it's very understandable that commissioners from South County and other areas of the county where it's a hassle to get into the city will continue to do it virtually. I certainly support that. But I think to the extent that we can start moving back to the normalization of public participation, I think that's a good thing. And so I do support starting to have hybrid meetings at our next meeting. In August, I will not be available for the July 21st meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Schifrin. Commissioner Rockton.
I just wanted to ask Director Guy Preston if you have anything to tell us about what's happening with possibility of bonding money from Measure D, which will allow us to bring money forward from the next 25 years of income to the present to be able to speed up a variety of projects. Obviously, interest rates are going up, and we're kind of losing the amazing gap that we had before. But what are we doing anything on this, and where are we at in that process, if anywhere?
Well, if you remember from the bond presentation, we need to show a reasonable expectation that the commission could expend the funds within 3 years of bonding. So the projects that we considered bonding on are all projects that we have or are planning on submitting grant applications for. So we have to wait until we receive notification as to whether or not those projects will have the additional matching funds from the state and possibly the federal government on one of our applications to be able to then bond and actually have the project go forward to construction. So we're still a little ways out, but we're very focused on it. We know interest rates are rising. It's one of the necessary things that need to go on right now to control inflation. Hopefully that'll start to show its effects and result in prices stabilizing and going down. So there may be some benefits. And I know from bonding in the past, where we ended up with interest rates, in the 4% range, we were able to refinance that when interest rates did go back down. So it is, a game that we all play. We're not going to miss the boat completely, and we may have some higher costs and interest rates, but we will still have opportunities to advance projects and avoid the escalating costs and bring projects forward sooner so people can start benefiting from those projects as soon as possible.
Thanks. That's very responsive to my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodkin. Other questions or comments? I'll just add that I concur with Commissioner Schifrin. I would love to see a hybrid meeting in August. I recognize that it is a bit of additional work to set up, but I think ultimately it will help make our meetings more accessible to all members of the public, as well as help the commission work together. I've been holding hybrid town hall meetings since the beginning of the year, and I'm consistently impressed by the number of people that show up both in person and continue to show up online. So it's really been a positive thing as far as making meetings more accessible. Commissioner Parker?
Just my 2 cents. I agree with your comments and Commissioner Schifrin's comments as well. Being from South County, that it seems as long as we can still participate virtually, that representation can still happen in a timely fashion. And it's much appreciated that hybrid is an option, and we do appreciate staff having to go the extra mile or multiple miles to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on the director's report? Seeing none, we'll proceed to, thank you, Director Preston. Proceed to item 25, the Caltrans report.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Brandy Ryder, and I'm the Office Chief for Transportation Planning here in Caltrans District 5. I don't have a lot of announcements today, but I did want to make one announcement related to a recent notice of funding opportunity. The US DOT has opened applications for the first round of funding for the Bridge Investment Program. This program will provide $12.5 billion over 5 years, with nearly $2.4 billion available in this fiscal year 2022. And so the purpose of the dollars is to plan, replace, rehabilitate, and protect and preserve the nation's largest bridges. The planning applications, there's 2 different grants available. One are planning grants, planning process, feasibility, and revenue forecasting. And then there's also construction grants for large construction projects. Those planning applications are to be submitted by July 25th of 2022, and then the bridge construction projects are September 8th of 2022. The notice of funding opportunity is out and available, and if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me. I'm sure that the RTC is well aware of the NOFA being out and available. And then one last update, just kind of a highlight. As we recently are kicking off our sustainable community grants. The next round of transportation planning grants is getting ready to kick off. We have some materials that will be coming out for review, both public review, and we'll be coordinating with the RTC staff so they have an opportunity. And then we'll be kicking those that grant cycle off at the end of the fall. And that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Ryder. Are there questions from members of the commission? Seeing none, any member of the public that wishes to comment on the Caltrans report? Seeing none, oh, I'm sorry, we have a hand raised by Fort, Zoom host. Go ahead.
Hi, Commission. I apologize for the wrong name there. This is Dana Siegel. I am wondering if the Commission could maybe comment on which bridges we could possibly apply for funding for. I realize this is a big question, but maybe we could follow up in an email to me or Fort. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sagal. I don't
Maybe we could just ask staff to respond to that request in a reasonably timely fashion.
Yeah,
because I have no idea what they might be.
Yeah,
I didn't mean now necessarily. I didn't take time.
But just so you know, we're aware of the NOPA and we were actually looking into it.
Sure.
It just came out.
Yeah, I didn't mean at this meeting, just at some point give them a response by looking into it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Preston. All right, seeing no further comments, thank you, Ms. Ryder, for the report from Caltrans. We'll now proceed to item 28, oral communications. It's an opportunity for a member of the public to address the commission on items in the jurisdiction of the commission that's not on the agenda, and for members who have not already spoken this morning during that general comment period.
We'll find that woman who's been trying twice to get on in the wrong place.
I think Farland, if you're still present, want to make a comment? Yeah, go ahead, Karina.
Yeah, thank you. So going back to the Bloomberg City Lab article, the title of it was "Train Fanatics, in quotes, score a win in California battle over idled tracks." Then it goes on to say the outcome represents a win for rail advocates who dream of restoring passenger service to Santa Cruz, like we ever had passenger service on the branch line. It goes on to say, but it also highlights the tortuous process of building transportation infrastructure in California and the differing visions for sustainable growth, which made me think of Supervisor Ellen Pyrie, lead representative to the RTC through the purchase of the rail corridor, who said that the branch line had never been viable for passenger rail, but that's a fight for another day. And it always stuck with me that why does it have to be a fight? You step in and you find yourself in a fight. And we have so many leading edge initiatives in Santa Cruz County, from all the conflict resolution initiatives to restorative justice, neighborhood accountability board for first time offenders, all of that. We really want participatory democracy models that support citizens to stand shoulder to shoulder, looking back at these huge problems that we have together and emerging with clarity in keeping with whole systems dynamics. So that's what I wanted to say, that we're in the 21st century and we'd really like to see some more participatory democracy models in the county that allow us to stand shoulder to shoulder. Probably the biggest thing through the campaign was people that I talked to that just said, I'm so confused and that I'm really shocked by the negativity of the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. Any other members of the public that wish to address us? All right, seeing none, we'll move to item 29, review of items to be discussed in closed session.
Thank you, Chair Koenig. We do have a closed session today regarding labor negotiations for the mid-management unit and the core group. And I would just give Ms. Parra and Executive Director the opportunity to note their abstentions for the record on the portions they'll be abstaining from.
Okay, and will there be any reportable actions?
We do not anticipate a reportable action today, Mr. Chair.
And were we sent a link for the closed session this morning?
Yes, it came
One
from,
was-
from CTV webinars.
Okay, let's find that.
And mine came in yesterday.
All right, and we'll take public comment on items that are in the closed session agenda. Ms. Corwin.
Thank you, commissioners. I am Krista Corwin. I am your admin assistant, but today I'm speaking as a member of the public. Let's have a little bit of fun. Show of hands, who gets too many emails on RTC topics? Okay, I'll take that as a rhetorical question. So go to your agenda packet, go to page 306. This is your correspondence log. And I want you to look in the upper right-hand corner, there's red text that says link to full comments. Click that. That is every email that comes into the RTC that might pertain to you. This is members of the public who want to speak to you directly. So I wanted to draw your attention to this because this is something new that the admin team has wanted to bring to you. We hear you that you get way too many emails. You can't respond to all of them. I get it. We want to make your job as easy as possible. Members of the public that are still on this call, I hope that you're paying attention to this too. And I want you to know there's actually no reason to CC every commissioner on your emails to the RTC Commission. If you email info@sccrtc.org and you're trying to get the attention of your commissioners, it will go on this document and it will be available 1 week when we post the agenda packet. It's available to the commissioners. Commissioners, go ahead and take a look at that document when you're, on your own time, when you're ready for that. So if you liked what we're doing on staff, and you appreciate the work that your core members, core folks are doing, then please consider a yes vote on today's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corwin. All right, seeing no other members of the public with their hand raised. Director Preston, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, at the request of legal counsel, I'm letting the commission and the public know that I will be abstaining in closed session for items relating to cost of living adjustments and anything that could affect my compensation as well. And Yesenia Para will also be abstaining from the discussions for the association of the RTC Middle Management Association as she is a member.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Riley Gerbrandt, is there a comment you wanted to make?
There is, yeah. I would like to, I'm the Associate Transportation Engineer with the RTC. And I know you just mentioned, Chair Koenig, that you were closing the public comment. So I just wanted to make sure that would be okay for me to, on my own time, make a comment to the commission.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Like I mentioned, I'm coming to you on my own time. I am an Associate Transportation Engineer here at the RTC. And I also have been coordinating with the core members in the negotiations for the labor negotiations, which is the item on closed session. We just wanted to highlight to you guys at the commission, as the commissioners, respectfully, the great work that the RTC staff in the core group have been providing. And I know it comes up time and time again through public comment and also comment from commissioners applauding and thanking staff for the excellent work that they do. I joined the staff a little over 6 months ago and have been really blown away at the caliber of staff here at the RTC, how wonderful they work and how wonderful we work providing services for Santa Cruz County and doing transportation planning services, as well as work on the rail line itself. And I just wanted to applaud the staff and say that we are doing a really good job and serving the community really well. And we ask that the commission look upon the proposal from the core members, and as you're considering that, remember the high caliber staff you do have, and that we would we want to enable the RTC to continue to attract really high caliber staff, and these negotiations are part of that. So thank you very much for hearing my message on behalf of the core staff.
Thank you, Mr. Gabran. All right, we do not anticipate any reportable action out of closed session, so that brings us to the end of our open session agenda. The next RTC meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 4th, 2022 at 9 a.m.
Actually, we have a meeting to recertify our ability to meet in private or something. I forget the date.
It's July 21st. It will be a
not in private, but it's already online.
Single item special meeting. And the next full regular meeting would be Thursday, August 4th.
Thanks.
We'll now take a 5-minute break and reconvene closed session at 11:17. Thank you.
Good job at sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.